This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. So yesterday was a big deal on Capitol Hill. You wouldn't know it because of how our media here in the United States reported it. For those that joined me on the live yesterday to watch this hearing, hopefully you are starting to understand the enormity of this censorship machine. This machine, which is heavily handed by Europe, is a driving force in trying to destroy our First Amendment. This advertising alliance called GARM, coming straight out of Belgium, yesterday it exposed them as being somewhat of a cartel in controlling information and free speech through advertising dollars, which is in the billions. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next here. Elon Musk posts this, writing, "Having seen the evidence unearthed today by Congress, X has no choice but to file suit against the perpetrators and collaborators in the advertising boycott racket. Hopefully, some states will consider criminal prosecution." I agree with him. However, just a couple days earlier, on July 1st, X went ahead and reinstated their relationship with the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. I'm assuming if he's going to be filing lawsuits, then this relationship probably is over, and it'll just be some time before they update the WFA website. So we'll just have to wait and see. Since this topic has come into focus, I think it's worth for us to go back to 2020 and revisit the interview that Prince Harry did with Fast Company. This interview was published on January 22nd, 2021, a little over 2 weeks after the Capitol riots. Keep in mind, this is well before he disclosed to the world that he knew about this so-called coup being staged on January 6th. Also to keep in mind that this was way before the Oprah interview where they lied their faces off. So at the time, nobody was really paying attention to this article and was like, yeah, whatever. For the most part, this interview went unchallenged, and there was very little discussion here, at least I know, in the United States about it. I doubt very many people even read it. And Harry and Meghan were literally flying under the radar with the alignment that they were making and effort that they were taking to undermine the Constitution. Going back and reading this now, the writing was on the wall on the efforts that they were taking to silence people. So let's go through it. I want to show you some things that didn't really pop out to anyone at the time, but they're popping out now as a result of this censorship industrial complex being exposed. So this interview was done 6 months after Harry had wrote that essay for Fast Company talking about redesigning social media, seen here back in August of 2020, right before our elections. 6 months later, Harry comes back and does this interview giving his opinion on the Capitol riots. And I do remember at that time, after they had advocated and sat on the bench to encourage people to vote, Americans were getting pissed off that this guy now is inserting himself and giving his opinion, which no one asked for, but no one really paid attention, and we all just rolled our eyes and ignored it. Over the past year, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, have become increasingly outspoken advocates for healthier social media, a topic that is clearly near to their hearts given the horrendous vitriol and harassment they have faced online and in the press. By partnering with organizations that aim to understand technology's impact on society and vocally critiquing the state of online life in the media, the couple are using their clout to push for change in the current digital ecosystem. In an essay for Fast Company last August, Prince Harry called on business leaders to rethink their role in funding the advertising system that underlies the misinformation and divisive rhetoric that's often shared on social platforms. Harry's quoted by saying, "This remodeling must include industry leaders from all areas drawing a line in the sand against unacceptable online practices, as well as being active participants in the process of establishing new standards for our online world." Against this background, Prince Harry is once again imploring people to pay attention to the problems social media have wrought. In a wide-ranging interview with Fast Company, he explains why social media platforms must be held accountable for the Capitol attack and the circumstances that enabled it, and why we must remodel the digital world before it's too late. I'm sure if you were an American at the time and you read this, Probably going through your head is like, who the F does this guy think he is coming here and telling us what we can say and what we can't say and remodeling social media? Like, who is he? No one took what he had to say seriously, but continuing on. Fast Company asks, 6 months ago, you wrote an essay for Fast Company in which you asked companies to take action to ensure the meaningful reform of our unchecked and divisive attention economy. How has your perspective on social media's role in society changed over the last few weeks since the attack on the U.S. Capitol? This is Prince Harry's answer. When I wrote that piece, I was sharing my view that dominant online platforms have contributed to and stoked the conditions for a crisis of hate, a crisis of health, and a crisis of truth. As I stand by that, along with millions of others who see and feel what this era has done at every level, we are losing loved ones to conspiracy theories, losing a sense of self because of the barrage of mistruths, and at this largest scale, losing our democracies. The magnitude of this cannot be overstated, as noted even by the defectors who helped build these platforms. It takes courage to stand up, cite where things have gone wrong, and offer proposals and solutions. The need for that is greater than ever before. So I'm encouraged by and grateful for the groundswell of people who work or have worked inside these very platforms, choosing to speak up against hate, violence, division, and confusion. So here is what I believe happened. With this interview, Fast Company sent Harry a whole list of questions. And who sat next to him in helping to write these answers? Meghan. It's filled with all her ridiculous buzzwords that she likes to throw out to sound intelligent when we all know that they're pushing for this socialism. So, like solutions and groundswell. Like, Harry didn't come up with that word. When you look back on this and you read between the lines, you realize that all of this was part of this censorship machine. The things that happened on that day, J6, had influence from the very same people who are trying to do this to us. The ones who influenced and pretty much stole our election by suppressing that Hunter Biden laptop story. Think about that. Harry was in the thick of all of it. You got to ask this question. Why did Fast Company feel that Prince Harry's opinion about J6 was really important? He's not an American. He doesn't believe in our Constitution or our civil liberties. Keep in mind, at this point, Harry had been in the U.S. for a hot second. So why is he talking about it as if he knew why it happened? These are the same people that have messed with people's minds in lying to our faces to manipulate us. So here Fast Company asks, why is this topic so important to you? How was your outlook affected by the well-documented online harassment you and your wife have faced in the UK? Prince Harry responds, I was really surprised to witness how my story had been told one way, my wife's story had been told one way, and then our union sparked something that made the telling of the story very different. The false narrative became the mothership for all of the harassment you're referring to. It wouldn't have even begun had our story just been told truthfully. Now, this, I think, is a Freudian slip, in my opinion. This harassment that he so speaks of is the harassment of people calling out their lies. So he's right. None of the harassment would have began had they told the truth from the beginning, which they didn't. Every time they tell their truth, it changes. It's inconsistent. So if they don't like people calling out these inconsistencies, then get your story straight. And this is the crux of the matter in why Harry and Meghan have been so hell-bent on reforming and controlling the online space. It's to ensure that these truths that they don't want coming out get silenced and suppressed. But listen to what he says next closely. But the important thing about what we experienced is that it led to us hearing from so many others around the world. We've thought a lot about those in much more vulnerable positions than us and how much of a need there is for real empathy and support. These two were the biggest predators. They sought out the most vulnerable people to exploit them, to make examples of them, to affect them negatively. They know that they don't have the support, they don't have the security, and they don't have the resources to fight back. So what did they do? They targeted people that were in vulnerable positions. And we saw that play out with so many of us in this community. And it's still going on. To their own degree, everyone has been deeply affected by the current consequences of the digital space. It could be as individual as seeing a loved one go down the path of radicalization, or as collective as seeing the science behind the climate crisis denied. Everything about this paragraph is a gaslighting exercise. Notice the language that Harry has used here in order to paint anyone who does not align with the agenda or support his train of thought or thinking. They're radicalized and extreme. Meanwhile, they're the ones behind the scenes triggering and getting people riled up, fabricating narratives to cause this division and hatred. What Harry says next, he should be embarrassed. We are all vulnerable to it, which is why I don't see it as a tech issue or a political issue. It's a humanitarian issue. From an early age, the guiding principle in my life has been about the duty to truth, the pursuit of compassion, and the alleviation of suffering. My life has always been about trying to do my part to help those who need it most. And right now, we need this change because it touches nearly every single thing we do or exposed to. Yeah, and that's why they want to control it. This has nothing to do with trying to do your part and helping who needs it most. Like, what about the Baka people, Harry? Like, what about breaking your grandmother's heart and turning your back on your own country? What about the bullying, harassment, and jeopardizing the safety of your own family, as well as harassing and bullying a particular veteran? What about that, Harry? Where was the compassion there? Where's the compassion for those invisible children and the example that you're setting for them? Next question. Where do we go from here? What do you think needs to change to create an online atmosphere where truth, equity, and free speech are all prioritized? What Harry says next gives him and Meghan away as to what they've been doing over the last 6 years. I ask the same thing every day and lean on the experts to help give guidance on how to reform the state of our digital world. Well, no one asked you to do that, Harry. How we make it better for our kids, of course, but also for ourselves now. The avalanche of misinformation we are all inundated with is bending reality and has created this distorted filter that affects our ability to think clearly or even understand the world around us. What happens online does not stay online. It spreads everywhere like wildfire, into our homes and workplaces, into the streets, into our minds. The question really becomes about what to do when news and information sharing is no longer a decent, truthful exchange, but rather an exchange of weaponry. These two assholes have been weaponizing the media from day one, pulling out that race card, attacking their own families with their lies, causing division and divisiveness between two countries. Harry knows about psychological warfare, and he's used it on the public, which is irresponsible for him to have a platform. But this is what the progressive left have been doing for the last several years, and this is why we're in the state that we're in at this moment. The hatred and division that Harry has generated from those bots, as well as the people that they have been paying to go around to intimidate, harass, and dox, jeopardizing their physical safety, all to create the optics that we really do need reform and control on the online space. This in itself tells a story as to exactly how manipulative these people are. Harry's virtue signaling continues on to say, the answer I've heard from experts in this space is that the common denominator starts with accountability. There has to be accountability to collective well-being, not just financial incentive. So you see right here, the words that he's using, all for the community, collective well-being. Well, Harry, I don't want the mental state that you're in right now, and I choose to be an individual. I am not buying into this collective mindset. What Harry says next is just laughable. It's hard for me to understand how the platforms themselves can eagerly take profit but shun responsibility. Oh, similar to like sitting on Oprah in front of a global audience to spew out your hatred and lies for your own family while getting a paycheck? There also has to be common, shared accountability. Says who, Harry? Everyone is for themselves at this point. You are responsible for you and only you. I don't want you telling me how I should be living, what I should be doing, what I should be sharing. I don't want to share anything with you. I mean, it's bad enough that you and your wife are in our faces 24/7 and taking opportunity away from people who legitimately deserve it, all because you and that wretched wife of yours don't like what they have to say. As he continues here, going into dictating how people should be using technology, on when they should use it, how long they should use it. He wants you to fact check the source and research the information you see. In other words, the information that is given to you by them on what is true and what's false, and not allowing you to come to your own conclusion and critically think for yourself. They literally want you dumb and stupid in this world that they're building. Finally, there's a responsibility to compassion that we each own. Humans crave connection, social bonds, and a sense of belonging. When we don't have those, we end up fractured. And in the digital age, that can unfortunately be a catalyst for finding connection in mass extremism movements or radicalization. I think Harry is a perfect example of his theory. When you look at how Meghan isolated him from his whole entire world, and he's online trying to look up everything that's being said about him, as well as supporting and funding this terrorist organization, yeah, look who actually became the one who was radicalized and is a threat on U.S. soil. Now you're going to have to read between the lines in this next question and answer. They ask, since the Capitol riot, big tech companies from Twitter to Amazon have exercised their power by making determinations about who gets to use their products. Do you think companies should have the power to make decisions about who has access to some of the most prominent platforms on the internet? Now, this is where Prince Harry had zero business injecting his so-called expertise and opinion here. He says, we have seen time and time again what happens when the real-world cost of misinformation is disregarded. There is no way to downplay this. There was a literal attack on democracy in the United States organized on social media, which is an issue of violent extremism. It is widely acknowledged that social media played a role in the genocide in Myanmar and was used as a vehicle to incite violence against the Rohingya people, which is a human rights issue. And in Brazil, social media provided a conduit for misinformation, which ultimately brought destruction to the Amazon, which is an environmental and global health issue. Let's back up on Prince Harry about this. 16 days, this interview was published. If this was an interview where he was given these questions and he had to write out answers for it, don't you think it would have taken a couple days to write all these beautiful buzzwords to push the narrative and facade in the direction that you want to go for reforming and controlling the internet? Which, if you use logic, then this was shortly written after the incident happened that day. Which then leads into the next question is, how did he know the core source and root of why this all happened? Those that weren't there that day had no idea that this was the core root of it. So how would Prince Harry know so quickly that this was the root cause of why this all happened? By people getting online, congregating together, and riling one another up to go out there and do what they did, which Prince Harry doesn't seem to understand, that Americans have the right to peacefully protest or take a position. What we saw unfold that day had instigation by the other side. So for him to have such intimate details and then disclose in November of 2021 that he knew that a coup was being staged, how can you boldly say that? And no one from the Democrat-led January 6th committee pulled him in to question him? Harry doesn't actually answer this question about products being taken away, but then goes into essentially attacking free speech by saying, in a way, taking a predominantly hands-off approach to problems for so long is itself an exercise in power. Recently, I've been thinking about Speaker's Corner, an area in London's Hyde Park, which is home to open-air debate, dialogue, and the exchange of information and ideas. I used to go past it all the time. This concept of a public square isn't anything new. It can be traced back to the early days of democracies. You get up there and speak your piece. There are ground rules. You can't incite violence. You can't obscure who you are. And you can't pay to monopolize or own the space itself. Ideas are considered or shot down. Opinions are formed. At its best, movements are born, lies are laid bare, and attempts to stoke violence are rejected in the moment. At its worst, intolerance, groupthink, hate, and persecution are amplified. And at times, it forces lines to be drawn and rules or laws to emerge or be challenged. I'm not saying we should abandon technology in favor of Speaker's Corner. Rather, it's that we should avoid buying into the idea that social media is the ultimate modern day public square and that any attempt to ask platforms to be accountable to the landscape they've created is an attack or restriction on free speech. I think it's a false choice to say you have to pick between free speech or a more compassionate and trustworthy digital world. They're not mutually exclusive. And here's where I disagree with this idiot. Words do not have power unless you give it. And once it turns into an action, then the action itself is isolated from those words. You cannot blame the word itself to say, well, I was forced to do this because somebody said X, Y, and Z about me. No, the responsibility is on the individual, but it's these people that want to convince the world that, no, we really do need to regulate your speech and we really do need to put these guardrails in to prevent you from going out and exercising your own free will. That's what freedom is about. It's up to the individual to exercise in knowing right from wrong. Hate speech, right speech, misspeech, whatever you call it, we all have that right here because of the First Amendment. And this is the thing, Harry's not stupid. He knows exactly how this manipulation works. He continues and he says, with these companies in this model, we have a very small number of incredibly powerful and consolidated gatekeepers who have deployed hidden algorithms to pick the content billions see every day and curate the information or misinformation everyone consumes. This radically alters how and why we inform opinions. It alters how we speak and what we decide to speak about. Don't let it fool you, but Harry truly does understand how this all works. And ultimately, Meghan and Harry want to be those gatekeepers, and that's what they're pushing for. Now, understand this next part because this is how he honestly thinks with all the lies that him and his wife tell. Ultimately, it has allowed for completely different versions of reality with opposing sets of truth to exist simultaneously. In this, one's understanding of truth does not have to be based in fact because there's always an ability to furnish some form of proof to reinforce that version of truth. I believe this is the opposite of what we should want from our collective online community. Again, I don't want to be a part of your damn community. The current model sorts and separates rather than bringing us together. It drowns out or even eliminates healthy dialogue and reasonable debate. It strips away the mutual respect we should have for each other as citizens of the same world. Here's the thing, Harry, we don't have to like everyone on this planet. The only thing that we have to do is coexist peacefully. But if we don't want to be collective and share the same space and community, that's our decision. If we want to congregate with like-minded people, that's our decision. Again, it goes back to understanding what's right and what's wrong, not policing what people are doing or thinking. It's going back to, let's get back to values, morality, ethics, and go from there before we even touch the online space. How about we change the dynamics and ideologies that are being implemented in these institutions that are now being forced into this online public space that is causing this division and disruption? Next question asks is, how do you plan to use your platform to push for change when it comes to hate speech, algorithmic amplification, and misinformation in 2021? Since you're not a trained expert on these topics, why do you think people should listen to your perspective? Prince Harry says, I know enough to know that I certainly don't know everything, especially when it comes to tech. But when you see this as a humanitarian issue, then you see the spread of misinformation as requiring a humanitarian response. You're such a joke, Harry. This is why my wife and I spend much of 2020 consulting the experts and learning directly from academics, advocates, and policymakers. Harry, which policymakers did you speak to? I would like to know. I think Congress would also like to know. We've also been listening with empathy to people who have stories to share, including people who have been deeply affected by misinformation and those who grew up as digital natives. What we hope to do is continue to be a spotlight for their perspectives and focus on harnessing their experience and energy to accelerate the pace of change in the digital world. More marketing, word salad bullshit. Next, Fast Company asks, your Archwell Fugazi Public Charity has collaborated with several groups and institutions that aim to rethink technology and study its impact on people. As a philanthropist, why are you supporting research efforts within this space? Yeah, Harry, do tell. If we've learned anything, it's that our dominant technologies were built to grow and grow and grow without serious consideration for the ripple effect of that growth. We have to do more than simply reconsider this model. The stakes are too high and time is running out. Didn't Megan say that? Or didn't Harry say that in the mockumentary? Someone said that the stakes are too high. But again, it's the same script, just the words mixed up a little bit. Given your concerns about divisiveness, misinformation, and hate speech online, how have your views on using social media yourself changed over the last few years? How do you approach it now, and are you planning to make any changes? This is a joke. It's funny you should ask because, ironically, we woke up one morning a couple of weeks ago to hear that a Rupert Murdoch newspaper said we were evidently quitting social media. That was news to us, bearing in mind we have no social media to quit, nor have we for the past 10 months, which, if we look at this in a different way, folks, they never left social media. They have always been on social media. They're just using it for malicious intent without getting caught. Anyhow, it says the truth is, despite its well-documented ills, and you would know something about that, Harry, social media can offer a means of connecting and community, which are vital to us as human beings. We need to hear each other's stories and be able to share our own. That's part of the beauty of life. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that a reform of the digital space will create a world that's all rainbows and sunshine, because that's not realistic, and that, too, isn't life. Well, Harry, you want to create a world where only your way is the right way. And if anybody else disagrees with that, which you acknowledge everyone is not going to agree, well, you know what? Tough shit. I think what's really gross about these two is that they fully understand the psychology about it. And they are willing to take away your community, the people that you surround with, if they don't like what it is that you represent or how you think or what you say and how you express it. I think Meghan and Harry do need a wake-up call, and I do think that Jim Jordan needs to subpoena Prince Harry to Congress because he's causing a lot of problems. And the fact that he went under the radar for so long about, one, knowing about January 6th, and two, his online behavior with all these bots and them going off and harassing and threatening people, I think needs to be called out. And I think more people need to see what Prince Harry is really all about. Tonight, Harry is going to be accepting an award that he did not earn, does not deserve, and quite frankly, is the complete opposite of what it represents. This man and his tyrannical wife want to take away the very same freedoms that Pat Tillman died over. I hope someone tonight spits in Harry's face. And that's my opinion. Anyhow, what do you guys think? I thought this was important to bring up, especially since this award is going to be given tonight, for people to really think about where are we going as a society if we're allowing this degeneracy represent what our children's future is going to look like. God, absolutely not. Anyhow, leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.